Welcome to episode 296 of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. I am your host, Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about Modern Warfare 3 on Game Pass, Blizzard and Bethesda unionize, 2,600 voice actors strike, and much more. Before we get started, subscribe to the Baunfire on your favorite podcast app and leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, or subscribe to the Bon Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. Thank you to everyone who supports as YouTube members and Twitch subscribers. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, please check out the link in the description of the show. You can also support the show by sharing new episodes on any social media platforms you enjoy, or just share it with a friend. You can check out my social media at Bon Diesel or at the Baunfire for posts and such to share. If you wish, I would really appreciate it. Let's get into the gaming news. We're going to kick it off with Xbox. This week it was announced the day before it happened that Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 would be available on Game Pass as it is right now as I speak. Pretty cool. This has been a long time coming. Everyone's kind of, or at least a lot of people are waiting with kind of bated breath for when we'll finally get that whole Activision Blizzard King catalog to go over to Game Pass and to kind of add all of that value there. There is probably, I would assume, some licensing issues and things like that. I've seen a lot of people being like, why won't they just do it? I mean, if I remember correctly, the Bethesda and ZeniMax acquisition, after they did that, they had those games on Game Pass extremely quickly. My assumption is that there's just licensing issues and they're working through all that stuff. It could be slightly strategic. Maybe they want to do it until after they do the price hike and all of that stuff. I have no idea. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. We will see how things are impacted by, I think I talked about it last week, but the FTC is looking into Game Pass and the whole ABK deal with Xbox again, arguing that it was anti-consumer for them to raise the price of Game Pass. I'm a little bit whatever about that move, not because I'm trying to defend Xbox, but just because I'm fairly certain, Netflix and Hulu and all those places, Disney Plus, have raised my subscription probably a half dozen times since the last time Xbox raised theirs. And like I said last week, I'm pretty sure I get a hilarious amount more of use out of my Game Pass than I do those apps typically. So really, my wife and kid use those more than I do, but I still have them because I do like to have them. So we'll see what happens with that. I am very curious to how things play out in the long run there. We also had rumors of a possible cloud Game Pass tier coming. That would be interesting. I had kind of my first real use of the cloud gaming this last week or two. I have a 4-year-old, and she's getting into games a little bit. She does everything, but every now and then she has the kind of hankering to play a video game and such. And the problem is that she'll play a game maybe once or twice and either beat it, because kids' games tend to be pretty short, or she gets bored of it and wants me to download another one. And so I do that, and then she wants to go back and play the other one again. And what's cool, at least about Game Pass, is that a lot of Game Pass games are kids games. There's a lot of those big kids games are there. The one she played most recently was a Bluey game, which I actually enjoy as well because I love that show. But I didn't want to download and delete and download it all the time and have it just sitting there on my board and stuff on my Xbox. So I tried out the cloud gaming for her. Xbox's cloud gaming, kind of known for not having the highest quality on earth, which is true from even what I noticed. But she doesn't care. She's 4. She just wants to play games. I have a really good internet connection, so lag isn't really an issue for me in that way. So I figured I'd give it a try. I did. She played the whole game and beat it over a few days, all through the cloud, and it worked great. I had no issues at all. Really, the only annoyance I had was I think every time I ended a session or after the first time when I started a session, it would pop up and be like, hey, do you want to download and have a better experience? And I feel like that should stop doing that after the first time it asks. It's good for it to ask. A big argument I've had for cloud and why like this cloud tier may be coming to Game Pass is I truly believe that at least right now, until cloud gaming and all of that stuff becomes better and more universal, I really believe that cloud is just a vehicle for Xbox to get people into the ecosystem, to just get them into Xbox. Because I truly believe, especially with the cloud tier thing on your PC or your TV, your phone, whatever, however you access it, I assume the idea is for people to play it, and maybe it's good enough. Maybe they don't mind. It's all they want. They play turn-based games, or they don't care about resolution and things like that. Then it works for them. But if not, I think it becomes a conversation that they want people to have of, oh, this is pretty cool. But I could just get a Series X or a Series S, and I could pay a couple more bucks more a month for this Game Pass because it's got these hundreds of games and these new games coming out and all that stuff. I'm assuming they feel like that conversation is going to lead to at least some hardware sales, or even people buying PC or who have PC but don't have Game Pass yet, being like, "Oh, okay, this is pretty sweet." You also have the added factor of the Play Anywhere thing, where you can play some on cloud, some on your console or on PC, and it's all going to sync up. There's also the impending change where, like, currently you can't cloud stream every game you own. It has to be on Game Pass. But that's going to change. Sooner than later, you're going to be able to stream any game. You're going to be able to use the cloud for any game you own. So, for example, I have The Division 2 on my Xbox with my hundreds of hours into it. Right now, I can't cloud stream it, to my laptop downstairs or whatever. But when they make that change, I'll be able to. It won't just be Game Pass games. And so I think as that stuff opens up more, it's going to make it more attractive to more people. Now, the big issue being that now they're introducing tiers of Game Pass, and not all of them have the same stuff. Like you have to have Ultimate to have cloud streaming at all, as well as some other things. To a point, I think you have to get to a point where they basically just have just Ultimate, and maybe you have other tiers as introductory things, and that's, I guess, kind of what they have. But there does come a point where, like one thing that I haven't even really talked about is how having first party games day one only on Ultimate and not some of the other tiers, but some of them, it is a lot. A big issue there is that they, now that Game Pass announcement is kind of sullied when a game pops up during an Xbox showcase and they say day one on Game Pass. Now there has to be a little asterisk that says at the bottom in really tiny print on Game Pass Ultimate, and it means that there's going to be paying customers in the subscription service who aren't going to get the full benefit. From a business and financial point of view, I completely understand why they're doing that. It makes complete sense. But from a consumer point of view, and where you're trying to win hearts and minds point of view, it doesn't help your argument. It definitely doesn't improve your situation. And, as someone who likes Xbox and wants them to succeed, I don't love that this is the angle they're going, and that they're kind of doing this thing that they always do where they just don't sell themselves well. Xbox has great hardware. They have great software. Their ecosystem, their UI, all that stuff, I think is really, really good. Arguably the best. they just, in my opinion, do the worst job of selling themselves. Whether it's a lack of marketing, whether it's bad marketing, whether it's you know only their bad stuff ever gets any press, which maybe not entirely their fault all the time. That's a bigger story, more than likely. But it's just that then, like, because recently there was the story about the European division of Xbox that someone who worked there basically said, like, oh yeah, we don't get any funding to do marketing here. Now there's probably explanations behind that. They probably did have a lot of funding at one point and it did nothing, so they pulled it back. But in this time and age, with the place that all of the different platforms are at, that's not really a story that Xbox probably wanted becoming a big thing and becoming a headline. And where, I've made the argument that I think a lot of traditional games media and a lot of content creators and stuff have really made Xbox the whipping boy for the industry. Whether it's fair or not, whether it's justified or not, and it's probably a mix, right? You can't step into that. Like, obviously you're going to have situations where, say you are the whipping boy, say there is something to that. You can only you can control that narrative a little bit. You cannot give those types of things the the ammunition, right? So this seems like one of those things. I do think the cloud gaming tier is a good idea. I think further convoluting things isn't. I almost am to the point where they just need to have two tiers, where they have Ultimate for $19.99 and maybe PC, cloud, or just Xbox for $9.99. You can pick whichever one you want, or you get all of it for $19.99. And just make it two tiers. Just Game Pass Basic and Game Pass Ultimate. And Game Pass Basic, you can get, you can use it for cloud, you can use it for just an Xbox, you can use it for just a PC, or you upgrade to Ultimate, double the price, but also way more features. I hate where they're now going to probably have, like 3 tiers or 4 tiers, plus 2 tiers that are kind of expiring but will still be there in the background. Like, this is one of those things where I always joke that, like, journalists and games media and all these people, they always turn their brains off whenever Xbox does anything and give the most, like, I can't think with my brain takes. But when you do stuff like this, it makes it easier to do that, right? So I'll be curious to how they handle this and how they message it, especially. And some pretty big news for Xbox in general. The Bethesda game studio, so not Bethesda as in like all the like the publisher, but Bethesda as in who makes like Fallout and Skyrim and things like that, or Elder Scrolls. 241 of their game devs have unionized, which I believe is a majority of the devs. On top of that, within a day or two, 500 plus Blizzard developers unionized, and that made up the entire World of Warcraft team. These are two significant moves. There's also some QA involved in that at Blizzard. Most of the unionizing we've seen when it comes to the games industry, even though there's been tons of calls for it, has been almost exclusively QA, quality assurance, the testing people, right? This is, I know other places have unionized. This is the biggest move I've seen with like really high profile devs, the developers of World of Warcraft. That's a high profile. That's a lot of people. The developers of Bethesda, of all their biggest titles, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal, actually. And I truly believe in my heart, this is probably the kickoff of the falling dominoes of, I bet we start seeing a bunch more of the studios in Xbox making these announcements where all their devs are getting unionized and they're part of it. And you may even start to see this too with EA and Ubisoft, like their American studios. I believe they're, because of the way that American employment laws are and all of that, as an American, you may hear about some of the benefits that people like Ubisoft Swedish studios, the benefits they get, and I believe they do have unions there as well. but just the base benefits they get for being a employer in that country, being a person who works for an employer in those countries, almost feels like union benefits here in the States. That's a whole different conversation to have, I guess. But I truly do believe we're going to start seeing this as a domino effect. I truly do believe we're going to start seeing a lot of this happening. I think the fallout is going to be hopefully more stability in the industry from a game dev employment standpoint. That hopefully will mean that more good people stay in the industry, and it is a more attractive industry for new people to get into, because I think that's a big issue right now. I think there's a big problem. There has to be a problem with young folks seeing what's going on with all the layoffs and all of the cost cutting and the way those things work, who are saying like, screw this, like game dev already doesn't pay as well as like a lot of equal, like someone who would become a programmer at a game studio can become a programmer for a Bitcoin website or a dog supply website, or someone who makes websites for these companies. Like you can go different routes with that same education and experience and probably make more money and maybe be more stable. That is a little ignorant. I'm getting outside of my depth a little bit. I do believe that the tech industry in general, we obviously just pay attention to gaming. I believe in general, tech is pretty not great to work in if you want long-term stability. So I think what's happening in gaming isn't as unique as people sometimes think it is, but it still sucks. And I'm glad that there's something being done about it. So yeah, these union, I truly do believe this is all those little QA announcements. I think like Activision and stuff, like those little QA studios were doing this stuff. Bethesda and the World of Warcraft team unionizing is a big deal. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. The last thing for ABK, it was a story came out that they have authorized the use of AI for concept art and marketing. At least that's where it's going to start. The AI thing it's one of those things that I think is inevitable. So to a point, I don't want to pretend to be like, to one, know everything about it. I don't. But I think I know enough to have to at least speak on it a little. And I see a lot of arguments about like, AI is just a tool that is not inherently bad. It's just the way it's used and the way it's created is the issue. And so if you don't know, a big part of the AI issue is that in order for AI tech to work, it needs to be trained. And the way you train it, say you want an AI to design concept art for an Activision game. Well, you would feed it art from Activision games. So you would feed it every cover art, concept art, any art that Activision's ever made for Call of Duty. And once you feed it all of that art and it learns like the kind of the aesthetic and everything about it, then you can type into an AI program and say, I want Soap McTavish on top of a aircraft carrier with a plane landing behind him and him holding an M4 rifle across his chest. And if it's been given enough info, enough material, it'll make essentially that. And if it's high quality material and if it's a good AI, it'll do it pretty convincingly. The problem is with AI, with a lot of AI, is that the data it's trained on is often not acquired or licensed properly. So there was a big scandal or a big thing that was going on this very recently, where we found out that very likely millions and millions of YouTube videos were used as training data for these AI, and it wasn't licensed. None of the, so the idea is that the people who make the original material these AI are trained off of should get paid. They should get a cut of what this AI makes, or they should at least, get paid for their data being used to train an AI that is then going to be used to make money, right? And that's why you see so many artists and stuff in the Mass Effect community and Dragon Age community. Culla, Elizabeth, and a lot of other people in those communities are really up in arms and not happy with it. And it's not just because the AI, like because of AI in general. I think there is an argument about it not really being art. You'll find a lot of AI people who give their prompters. They put in prompts of the type of art they want the AI to make. Some of those people think they're artists because they can type words, and that's probably not true. like come on. Like comparing themselves to people who actually draw and make art, right? So that's one part of the argument. But another part of it is that if you want to make an AI that can design Mass Effect or Dragon Age art, whether it's concept art or fan art or whatever, you would not only, ideally, you want as much data as you can get. So you would use all of the data made by BioWare and all of that. But then if you were shady, you would also pull in all of the fan art ever made for those franchises. And it doesn't have to be shady. If you either have licensing agreements with those people to pay them up front to use that, or give them a percentage of the money you're going to make from that tool that was trained on their art, then that can be more legitimate to a point. But that's not what's happening. And what we're finding is that there's a lot of these AI are being trained on data that isn't being properly licensed, that the original creators aren't being paid for. And the reason that matters is because people think that this AI is just coming up with this art and that it's so expertly programmed and stuff. And that's not true. That's not what's happening. What's happening is it's essentially, taking, it's copying other people's art. It's using their talent and their creations to kind of put out its own version of what they did. At least that's my take on it. There's very little, if any, AI right now doing anything original, completely original. It's to the point where they're so desperate for more data for a lot of these things. And this just isn't art. This can be anything. This can be writing. This can be, recognizing issues and medical charts. Like it's AI is being used for all this stuff, and it's using data for all that, right? A big problem right now is that some AI companies are using AI to generate data to train AI. And then you get into this weird spot where when you don't have any original data to train these AIs on, they're being trained on artificial data, then it's not going to work, right? Because it's not making original thoughts. It's not doing anything original. It's just taking actual things real people have done and created and learning how to do it pretty well, but not perfectly. So it's an interesting conversation. We're going to talk about it again when we talk about some of the SAG-AFTRA or SAG-AFTRA, whatever it is, strikes that are going on. We'll get back to this, I promise. But it's an interesting world. I do think, unfortunately, AI is inevitable in some capacity. But if it isn't wrangled early, and if rules aren't put in place early to make sure that it's not it has to be regulated in some capacity, and that's kind of happening, thank goodness, to a point. If it doesn't happen early, it's not going to happen. It's going to get out of control. And I think it could be really bad, right? So we'll see what happens. I am curious. Moving over to some PlayStation news, Concord has been did some testing and kind of had its news cycle happen, and it's kind of interesting. I've seen people, especially people who are fans of like Overwatch and stuff, of this type of game, have like generally good like basically saying that the game is fun. But then those same people almost universally being like, "Oh, this game's gonna fail." Like, it's just not. It's cool, and it has potential, but it's not really doing anything that's gonna pull people in the way that they would probably like it to. If you don't know, Concord again is a PlayStation first party game that's trying to do basically the Overwatch thing. And that's tough. That's a tough genre to get in, because you could argue that its prime has kind of passed. And even whether that's true or not, it already has like major players, especially with Overwatch, even though Overwatch 2 has floundered a little, but you've got, other games like Valorant, and then you obviously have like the CS:GO and stuff, which is not quite in the same genre, but is adjacent, I guess. There's just such big players in this space already that when you try to do your own, and it's only going to be on PC and one other platform, and then it's testing on PC, it shows that it is not popular at all to the PC crowd. You're in a tough spot. That's a tough spot to be in. So I'm curious to how they handle this. They're going in pretty hard with marketing and stuff on it. They are putting out a limited edition DualSense controller. They're doing all these little animations and stuff like that. It's interesting. I'm curious to what happens with it. I have no interest in it, even though I have a PC and I could play it. These type of games aren't really my thing in general, and it's not doing anything that's making me think, I didn't really care for Overwatch, but this will be my stuff. It's not doing that for me. So you also have the competition of Marvel Rivals. If you haven't seen anything about that, it's an Overwatch clone basically, except it's in third person and it's all Marvel characters. And while that sounds like it should be awful, it appears to be pretty popular and people seem to really enjoy it. So I'll definitely be curious to how all of this plays out. I think Concord is a weird way for PlayStation to start trying to like finally branch out from just doing sad dad third person story novel games, which they're obviously extremely good at, arguably the best. But that's kind of their niche, that niche in the sense that they still sell tons of them. But, they don't have a giant first-person shooter franchise, which is what this seems like they were kind of shooting for, because they haven't really had that since the Killzone games, maybe Resistance, if you consider that. I wouldn't. It's even arguable that with like Destiny and Marathon coming from Bungie, that's kind of why they grabbed those, but those are multi-platform games. So, this seems like it was an attempt to get like their own thing that's different than their norm. And it just doesn't seem like it's worked out. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. We also found out that on August 6th, the PSVR 2 will get an app so it can use your Steam library. That is a really big deal. This has been news that's been coming for quite a while. We've been hearing for a pretty good while that they were going to do this compatibility thing, because as far as I remember, there's been one exclusive game for the PSVR 2 from Sony. It was the Call of the Wild, I think, or it was a Horizon VR game, which apparently was pretty good, but that's it. They haven't really invested heavily other than that, at least nothing exclusive. And since they initially were so resistant to allowing this to work on other platforms where you had to buy this, was like $400 or $500 VR headset, and you had to have your $400 or $500 console, well, then you start, people got so mad when people talked about that, but you can't play it by itself, so you have to have the console. So then it is a $800,000 to $900,000 unit, and when you look out into the market, there's VRs you can get for that that are completely standalone. And maybe they don't do everything perfectly as well, but they do some things better, especially having a better library of games. This seems like the solution to that to a point. I still don't really believe this is going to be a solution to PSVR 2's problems. My assumption is that Sony is doing this so they can try to move the hardware that they made and invested in. I do not take this as a renaissance for the PSVR 2. Though, the last thing I'll say about it, the Portal, I think it's like $200 handheld screen controller combo that you have to have a PlayStation to use it for, where it can't play its own games. It's a little tablet with the controllers basically that's made by Sony. It has to connect to your PS5 that you have to own for this thing to even work. Has been pretty wildly popular. I suspect they probably didn't make a ton of them, and so when they talk about them like selling out and selling really well, they're probably just selling to expectation, which is great. I doubt they're selling millions of them, but if they're selling as well as they thought it would, that's all Sony cares about, right? I think the PSVR 2 could be a thing like that as they open it up to other ecosystems, and maybe it could kind of have a renaissance. I'm not expecting now to find out, though, that they're in the middle of producing, making 5 more VR exclusive PSVR 2 titles. So we'll have to wait and see. And then with Nintendo, our news for them this week is that there is a new Lego set for Super Mario World's Mario and Yoshi. So if you're into Legos, go check that out. Moving on to non-platform news, we have 2,600 plus voice actors are striking. The SAG-AFTRA, I believe, union group that represents a lot of video game voice actors and actresses is in the middle of a strike. It's primarily a push to protect from AI tech, which we were talking about before. A big concern. What's interesting is I think a lot of the attention goes to the really big voice actors and whether or not they're cool with this. Of course, I'm going to forget his name as I'm trying to do this. But the guy who's in everything, who voice acts in every single thing, he's Joel in the Last of Us games. I'll remember as soon as I'm done with the podcast. He famously, during the COVID times, tried to sell his voice through an AI business and got massive pushback from everyone. And I bet he was getting a lot of private calls and DMs as well from probably other well-known voice actors and actresses being like, hey, like, no, we're trying to stay away from that. Don't be doing that, sir. And he pretty quickly pulled back on that. The big names are the ones everyone thinks of with this AI issue with voice acting, and that could be, and that's valid. What people don't realize that a bigger issue are actually the people who do like really tiny roles or like background NPCs and things like that, because the idea basically was that some of these game devs and companies and publishers were trying to get these people to come in to do this like background chatter, but making them sign contracts that allowed that data to be used indefinitely and to be used to train AI. So yeah, you get this job where you get paid a couple $100 to come in and record some background voice acting for a game for, a crowd or something, like when your protagonist is walking through a market and you hear the chatter happening in the background. Like you get paid for that job, but then if your contract says they can use that data to train AI and that AI can recreate your voice but say anything they want it to say, whether it's as a background NPC or as a protagonist, that's where people are concerned about this, because it's going to put people out of work. And so it seems like primarily this strike is happening to get assurances and things like that. I believe the way this was going, they've been working on this for a couple of years. I believe that the union or the group here and the most of the companies involved had agreed on like almost everything. Like they're like super close to a contract getting signed with the majority of these big publishers, and there's like one sticking point left. So they'll probably figure this out pretty quick. I mean, these companies need to make their games, and especially these big voice actors that are a part of this, it's going to make it tough for them to do that. It is worth noting that games that are late in development or games as a service games that have like an ongoing need for voice actors from like years ago, potentially like the Division 2, Destiny, things like that, they can still work on those games, but any new projects or projects like in early development are cut off right now. So you have games like a game like Dragon Age, The Veilguard. It's fine. It'll be okay, which we'll talk about in a moment. It's so late in development now that like we had at Comic-Con, that they were doing a panel, and they were allowed to do that because it's a project that's nearing completion and isn't part of their kind of pushback on what they're allowed to participate in. But if there's a game that's just getting into full production and they're starting to do some voice acting stuff, they can't do it anymore. It's and those companies are going to have to figure that out, and I assume that's the pressure they hope they can exert to get this stuff figured out. So power to them. We want these people to keep being able to do their job. Speaking of Dragon Age, the Veilguard, we have some updates there. From Comic-Con, we got a bunch of like small info, but one of the interesting things that we found out is that there's 700 voiced characters, that includes NPCs, and 140,000 voice lines. That's twice as much as Inquisition. A really big, I want to say it's like 60 or 70,000, or a large chunk of this is just the 4 protagonist voices. But that's still, so even if that's half, you're still talking about the other half of these lines being everyone else in the game, which is still as much as Inquisition, not including a protagonist. Like, that's pretty cool. There's a lot of talking going on there. There's been a lot of devs and stuff talking about how like the side chatter and the kind of inter-crew chatter while you're going around the world and stuff is pretty prolific. And I'm really excited to see and hear that. Especially, I love when they do this kind of party chat that is very contextual and is taking into account either the things going on in the story or the environment they're in, or just, kind of random, maybe specific interactions between specific characters. I'm excited to hear all of that. What we did not get at Comic-Con was a release date. They did, it was Black Horse, or Dark Horse, did announce a art book for the Veilguard. And I saw people talking about how the Inquisition art book came out the same day as the game. And so if they're announcing the art book for the Veilguard, I don't know if they released a date for that yet or not. They probably didn't, because they probably won't announce it until the game date is announced, if they're the same. But that is at least, that's coming. I truly believe that all of this is just coming to a head. I've seen people be like, well, maybe they're going to delay the game. Maybe they're not sure when it's going to come out yet. I would argue they probably know the exact date it's coming. I think, one, they're waiting until the last minute to say it in case anything does come up. And two, it seems like they've had an extremely purposeful marketing push for the last month and a half or whatever it's been since the Xbox reveal. So I think it's coming sooner and later. I think that game is coming. They keep saying fall 2024. That starts in September. I wouldn't be surprised if it comes out in September. That seems likely, if anything. So excited to see that. What I haven't been excited to see is some toxicity in the Dragon Age kind of community. I stick more to my Mass Effect stuff. I make videos occasionally about Dragon Age, but I'm not in that community. But I know some people who are. And it really sucks, because there's like multiple people I've seen, speaking of like Kala Elizabeth and others, who are making this content that's either very informative and factual about things that we found out, or it's just them being excited about this coming, which is really great too. And there's quite a few of them in this boat. And what sucks is that there's also people in the community, if you want to consider them as part of the community, who are doing the grift thing, who are doing the anyone who's excited is a shill, and I'm going to make a 20-minute video about that. Or here's why BioWare is woke and this game's going to go broke. Doing that whole grift. Like, it's so stupid. Like, I'm so tired of it, because if these people had actual grievances and like had thought behind them, I would say, hey, that stuff still isn't for me, but at least they're making their point, I guess. The problem is that these people don't make their point. They do, they say the exact same stuff about every single game that's coming out. You literally just, can copy and paste whatever new game is coming and put it in there. These people have even turned on games that were like built just for them. Stellar Blade is this game that is basically a, boob and butt physics test game. And I know it's more than that, but that's how a lot of these dudes have treated it. And like this one, I won't get into it. There's like this one chick who makes the videos that do with all the woke crap. And it's just like so depressing, because it's just like the ultimate sellout move to just be like, I know that because I'm whatever. I'm not gonna get into it. None of these people will ever see this anyways. I am small enough that no one cares. But it's frustrating, because There's nothing wrong with criticism. There's nothing wrong about being critical and expressing thoughts like that. But to me, there's just so much transparency around the people who don't really think the things that they're saying. They just know that it's going to get 20,000 clicks on a YouTube video. And what's even more frustrating about that is knowing that that's not even enough to be worth selling out for. Like, if you can sell out and get a guaranteed 100,000 clicks, 500,000 clicks, 1,000,000 clicks on a video and views, that might be worth it, to a lot of people. But what's so wild, and it's not just been Dragon Age or BioWare, I've seen it in every single gaming community I've been a part of, is you'll see these people, the Division 2 was really bad for this, and Division 1 as well, where you would see these people sell out and go for this hyper toxic, really awful kind of style and to cater to that community. And they would do it in, like, compared to me, who gets like a couple hundred views or maybe a couple thousand views on my videos, for them to get 5 or 10,000 views on every video they make is like, man, I wish I had that. I just don't want to do what they do. But then when you compare them to like real content creators on this platform, on YouTube or other platforms, they're still getting pennies. Like, they're not making money. They're just selling out for some attention. And that sucks, right? Because it's, most of these people, they've either convinced themselves they believe it, or they know they don't, but they're just going for the grift. So ignore those people. Please don't give those people clicks and views. I may or may not troll through YouTube every now and then and find these people and say mean things in their comments for fun. I have the privilege of being a nobody, and so no one's going to notice them, and I still get my shot in. It makes me feel good, and that's my toxic trait. So there we go. Speaking of that community, Ubisoft released comments on the Assassin's Creed Shadow one of the protagonists, and seemingly trying to address some, like, quote unquote controversy about one of them, it being a black dude who's a samurai. I appreciate what Ubisoft was trying to do. The problem is that the people who are upset about this situation don't care about the truth, or don't care that Assassin's Creed isn't like a historically perfectly accurate game. The character, the real person this character is loosely based on, loosely was arguably what they're saying they were. And what's funny about it is that, this is a big problem. But every other inaccuracy in every other Assassin's Creed game, was never an issue, but now it is, and it's pretty obvious why, right? So, is what it is. I think Ubisoft was trying to do the right thing, but you can't appease these people, because even if you gave them the perfect response and addressed the issue perfectly, they're just going to find another angle, because again, most of these people don't really care about the actual issue. They just spot an opportunity to stoke, really what it is, racism or just toxicity, to get people going and to get clicks. It's all about that attention. It's all about that. And it's always just so obvious, which is, really frustrating. So, again, I appreciate what they tried to do there, but it was fruitless and pointless. And their best, in my opinion, bet is to just ignore those people, because they're just a vocal minority and they don't really deserve the attention they get. And more fun news, Humble Bundle laid off 36 employees, but claims they aren't shuttering, even though they definitely are. That's their entire staff. Supposedly this was Ziff Davis, I believe, the IGN Entertainment person, which we'll be talking about again, saying that they're just like restructuring, but they don't have a staff anymore. So I don't really know what that means. But Humble Bundle is a publisher of indie games, and there's a handful of indie games that are signed on to them right now that don't really know what comes next. I believe a few of them have already released on PC, but Humble Bundle was handling their console platform releases, and now they're kind of in limbo. So keep an eye out for that. If there's any of those games you're excited for, make sure you're paying attention to them and seeing what they're going to end up doing, because it sounds like they may not be able to get their deal done through Humble Bundle. VGC, an ad sales partner with the Gamer Network, which was recently acquired by IGN Entertainment, has started a Patreon despite being a independently monetized traditional gaming media website, as well as their actually kind of small YouTube channel. I initially posted about this on social media and in my Discord about how they are part of the Gamer Network. They're just partnered with them, so they just do ad sales through them. Because my original point was like, man, it's nuts that this company is part of this IGN Entertainment, this Gamer Network, and they still have to do a Patreon. VGC is owned by, I believe it's Andy Robinson, and it is independent technically. They just do their ad sales on their website through, now IGN Entertainment. Still isn't a great thing, right? Like if you have this website that's supposed to be this traditional media website that has tons of ads all over it, I think already had a subscription model, and now you're doing a Patreon. Like, I know that these Patreon reveals are always like, they're kind of exciting the day they happen, but they almost always lead to these places shutting down 6 months later. And I don't really want that. I actually really used to love VGC, and there still is a lot of good stuff there. There's a few individuals who work there who are like hyper like console war baiting people, and that really frustrates me because they're the more prolific people there. But they're not a bad website. But I definitely don't think there's an argument to make that this is like a good sign for VGC. It's probably bad. Whenever you're starting to say, hey, can you guys just give us the money on the side and we'll like give you an extra podcast that you probably don't care about anyways, the one that we already have. I did Patreon for a long time. I just stopped even promoting it because I wasn't giving out enough content to justify people paying me even just a couple bucks a month. Obviously I promote, YouTube membership and Twitch subscription and stuff. But that's up to you. Like, that's up to you. And you do get things for that inherently, even if I produce no content. But I do, but not really enough, in my opinion, to justify this. Obviously these guys do a lot more content. But like I talked about with Game Pass and Disney Plus and all that stuff, people expect a lot for their money now, for better or worse. And the biggest thing is I think that these traditional media doing this, there's a lot, especially in the gaming industry, especially in the game media industry, there is a lot of... there's just oversaturation of these Patreons and stuff. Like, you can easily be a member of 30 Patreons if you're paying attention. Even just 5 or 10 is a lot, especially if it's $5-10 a month for each. And I've been a member of multiple of these, and I don't think I've ever felt like I got my money's worth from any of them. One blocked me from their Discord and their content like 3 months into a 1-year subscription I had for them. And I was never able to get my money back because they never responded to me, conveniently. And I never found out why I was banned and blocked and stuff anyways. But that's maybe that's a personal beef that I shouldn't have just put on here, but no one's gonna care. Yeah, but this is probably not great. And as much as crap as I give the traditional media folks and gaming, YouTubers and podcasters aren't a replacement for that. The people who know how to actually write an article and do an investigation and get receipts and do interviews, that's a dying skill. And I think part of my issue with a lot of the traditional games media now, IGN and a lot of these other websites and journalism hubs, is that a lot of their people don't have any education or experience in actual journalism. A lot of these places are having people write articles and do these stories who are just kind of glorified content creators who are just kind of winging it. And it's very, very obvious when you especially look at IGN and stuff, where some of their old guard are like more traditional journalists, and a lot of the people there now aren't. And it is really obvious, and it's pretty frustrating. So I'm curious to what happens with all of this stuff in the long run. I unfortunately am not super hopeful, but I'll try to be. doing some updates and personal news. The only big thing I have is for anyone who's been kind of following along with the weight loss stuff. At the beginning of June, I was 282 pounds for the Americans. And as of the recording of this, I'm 260. So pretty good so far. Hoping to get to 250 by the end of summer. And if there's anyone else doing their own thing, please jump into the Discord, go to the weight loss room and talk about it, or even just in the YouTube comments if you want to talk about if you've made any progress this summer. Let me know. I want to play games for a long time, so I have to be healthy and like alive. So that's a goal for all of us, I think. And that is where I'm going to wrap this episode up. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and please consider supporting all of my content by watching, listening, sharing, and following all my socials, or throwing a few bucks my way via the link in the description of the show. If you have your own topics or questions or feedback, be sure to let me know in my Discord and the YouTube comments, or hit me up on Twitter at Baundiesel or at the Baunfire. That is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. So until next time.